technology. They had the helicopters, the infrared equipment. They had the canine units out there. This was good, what they call footwork, good groundwork. With all the equipment we had, it still took police officers, boots on the ground, to determine where this fellow was, and then they captured him.
All right. I'm so glad that you're here. We are going to get set now for Fox News to kind of toggle over to Fox Report and reset as we await the governor, who's set to walk up to the lectern. And I'm looking down at my notes now to see potentially when that's going to happen, because we should get a moment by moment. Let's take a break. And it will be a very quick break. A Fox News alert now. The governor of New York set to hold that news conference I just mentioned as law enforcement officials confirm escapee and convicted killer David Sweat has been captured, and they brought him in alive. A dramatic end to a massive manhunt involving more than 1,000 officers, which had been underway since Sweat and his fellow inmate Richard Matt broke out of a maximum security prison facility all the way back on June 6th. I'm Harris Faulkner. This is the Fox Report. Here's what we know. A massive manhunt was brought to a close in the town of Constable, New York. That's just 2 miles from the Canadian border. And the tick-tock of all of this, shortly after 3 o'clock Eastern, a state trooper spotted a man who looked like the convict walking down the street. It was, in fact, David Sweat. Seconds later, authorities say at 3:20 p.m., Sweat turned and run, and that New York State trooper shot him twice in the back. At this hour, Sweat is in a hospital, and we showed you the ambulance who was taking him away just moments ago. And so what we've been able to learn, he was at the Alice Hyde Medical Facility there in Constable, and then they are going to transfer him to the Potsdam Canton Hospital which will be a transfer spot before going on to Albany. So that is a little bit of an update. So we're waiting to learn exactly where they're going to take him to work on him, finally, to work on his wounds. Let's bring in Steve Rogers again, a retired lieutenant detective for the Nutley, New Jersey Police Department. He was speaking with me just before the hour. So as we await the governor, what is some of what you'll hear, do you think, from all of this? I'm curious about the details. Do you think they'll tell us much?
Well, I think what the governor will state, without compromising the investigation. Now we got to remember, Harris, this begins a whole new investigation. The who, what, when, where, and why this happened in that prison. Every prison correctional officer is going to be interviewed. They're going to look at their security makeup there. I mean, there's a lot involved here. And you know what? You know, the outcome of this is extraordinary because he was taken alive.
Right. And you know, maybe he would do some sort of deal to try to get himself a better situation inside that prison. But the reality is, he's already doing life.
Well, that's right. Look,
so what's it going to be
chips.
like? Life? I mean,
Yeah.
you've kind of reached the end of that.
You're
So
right. You're right.
One thing that Bernard Zapper, just as you were walking up to the set moments ago, the special agent, ATF formerly, was speaking with me about is that his ego may drive him to do more than anything that they could ever promise him.
Well, that's absolutely right. And law enforcement has a very methodical way of getting information out of people. And look, I thought about the same thing you just said. What can they possibly offer this guy? But it may be his ego. It may be something that we are not aware of that he feels will make him an extraordinary, famous individual. He is now very infamous. But the point is that he's alive, and now we have to find out who knew what and when, especially in the planning stage of the entire operation.
Yeah, and we're already finding out more and more about the help that these guys had, perhaps the manipulation that ensued, and whether or not this was systemic.
Well, if it is, I'm sure they'll find out. But I could tell you this, what also goes through the mind of many law enforcement officers, what an argument to reinstate the death penalty. The millions of dollars, the lives that could have been threatened, lives could have been lost. These guys were clear-cut killers. They should have gotten a death penalty, and of course in New York there is no death penalty. But that's something that the state of New York ought to reconsider.
Well, and at the very least, reconsider the honor role that they have in the prison system up there.
Oh, well,
I mean, how can you do what these guys did? I mean, David Sweat didn't just kill a sheriff's deputy.
Right.
He ran over the body to make sure he was dead.
Yeah, he should be put in a cell all by himself. When you speak of honor roll, yep, they'll worship this guy, but the real honor roll here are the police officers, the boots on the ground that did their job, and the citizens that stepped up. You know, quite often on Fox, you know, we have said, if you see something, say something. Well, you know what, Harris? A few people saw something and they said something, and this is the result of the information that they gave to the police early on this search.
You know, Steve, I read a little bit in your background and that you're former military. And this, to me, especially when it got to be 2 weeks into it, looked very much like a military operation. I mean, just how many people were galvanized in all of this? 1,600. All right, I'm going to stop myself from talking now because it looks like they're getting ready to walk to the microphone here. And we haven't been given a 2-minute warning. So as we see the governor walk up, Governor Cuomo, as he walks into the scene. But what the point I was making was this seemed to take on so much more than it was in the beginning, looking like an operation that was much more military-like.
Keep in mind that we have a lot of law enforcement officers who are prior military people. They know the tactics, they know the strategy, and I'm
like
sure they employed that strategy, what they learned in the military, in this operation. And keep in mind, he was dressed in camouflage too, so he knew how to cover and hide. It was the objective of the police to expose this cover and hide tactic that he had. They flushed him out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So as soon as we get word of the governor walking in, whenever you see them form like the 3 lines deep, so on and so forth, we know we're close. All right. Let's take a pause here and let's watch the governor.